The doctors were moments away from shutting off the machines and declaring the pregnant woman lost, when a donkey walked through the hospital doors. What happened next? No one, not even science, can explain. St. Hope Memorial Hospital, Kentucky, 3:12 a.m. A rain-soaked silence hung in the air, and then the automatic glass doors slammed open with a violent hiss. At first, no one moved. The glow of a flickering fluorescent light reflected off the rain-slicked tiles of the hospital floor. A paper coffee cup spun slowly in the draft forgotten on the front desk, and then it stepped inside. Not a man, not a patient, but a donkey. A real, breathing, soaked-to-the-bone donkey, gray coat speckled with white around its forehead, hooves echoing with a strange authority against the polished floors. His ears were tall, alert, and his eyes, they weren't wild. They were knowing. The kind of eyes that make you question everything you believe about the world. Jesus Christ, what the hell is that doing in here? The receptionist shouted, her chair screeching backward as she stood. Joe, the night guard, built like a linebacker, but usually asleep in the security booth by 3 a.m., ran in, hand already on his taser. He froze, because Jasper, as they would come to call him, wasn't running. He wasn't scared. He wasn't even lost. He was walking with purpose, straight ahead, head low, tail still, toward the left hallway, where the maternity wing was located. Joe, do something. I don't think he means harm, Joe said quietly, watching the animal pass. Look at him, like he knows where he's going. But how could he? There were no horses on this side of town, no farms nearby. The security footage would later confirm. He had come alone, through the rain, down the middle of an empty road. No one saw where he started from, or why he chose that hospital, that entrance, that hour. What would make an animal walk into a hospital like that? What could possibly drive him toward the maternity wing? And why did no one stop him? Because here's where things start getting strange, deeply strange. The kind of strange that doesn't come with explanations, only consequences. But let me ask you something. What if this wasn't just a lost animal, but a messenger? And what if what happened next wasn't just rare, but impossible? As Jasper walked, nurses leaned into doorways. One of them, Lisa, who'd worked trauma in Iraq and thought she'd seen it all, crossed herself instinctively. At the nurse's station, one woman whispered, "We had a stillbirth in 207 last night. Maybe he smells it." But Jasper didn't even glance at that room. He passed it. Instead, he turned left, when there were no indicators, no scent, no sound, and headed straight toward room 203. That room held Emily Walker, a woman fighting for her life, alone, sedated, and with a baby inside her who hadn't moved in hours. The nurses radioed in for someone to intercept the donkey. The call never went through. The line was open, but the system didn't register a signal, just static. And here's the part no one could ever explain. When Jasper reached the door of room 203, the baby's heart monitor, flatlined for almost 4 minutes, suddenly came back to life. Thump, thump, thump. Strong, steady, loud. Jasper stopped, lifted his head, and stared through the glass. He didn't bray, didn't kick, didn't make a sound, just stood there. The nurses froze. No one dared open the door. Carol, the head nurse, who just decided she would notify the doctor to initiate a withdrawal of care, stood paralyzed. She looked at the monitor, looked at Jasper, looked at Emily. Then Emily's hand twitched. Her lips parted, just a little. Had she said something? No one could hear. Had she felt something? Joe, still standing in the hallway, muttered under his breath, "That's not just an animal." But if not, what was he? Now, let's return to the question. What could make a donkey walk into a hospital during a stormy night, at the exact moment a mother and child are dying? What kind of intelligence, or intention, could guide such a creature? And what if that wasn't even the strangest part? Because 2 floors above room 203, in the intensive care unit, another monitor began to blink. Michael Carter, 31 years old, Emily's fiancé, comatose for 19 days after a motorcycle crash. He twitched, then again, fingers, eyes fluttering, a slight groan. Nurse Danny dropped his clipboard. No, no, he's been brain dead, he gasped. But Michael's heart rate rose. His blood pressure normalized. His brain scans, flat since week 1, flickered, right as Jasper took one step closer to Emily's bed. Coincidence? Luck? Divine intervention? Or was this all part of something else, something far too big to understand in that moment? Let me ask you again. What if everything you believed about life, about death, was incomplete? And what if tonight, a donkey was about to teach you the truth? Inside the dimly lit corridors of St. Hope Memorial Hospital, 3:14 a.m., Jasper walked past the nurse's station like he belonged there. His hooves clicked softly against the tiles, rhythmically, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something no one could name. The overhead lights flickered, not all at once, but one by one, as if they were reacting to him, not the other way around. Nurse Lucy had been charting vitals on a tablet when she first heard it. The unnatural sound of hooves in a place meant only for sneakers and gurneys. She lifted her head, confused at first, then alarmed. It wasn't possible, but there he was. A donkey, not bolting, not braying, just walking like he knew the way. Is this some kind of prank? Lucy whispered, standing up, the tablet still clutched in her hand. No, said a voice behind her. It was Harris, the night tech from radiology, who'd come out of the break room holding a microwave burrito. He's heading toward maternity. Lucy turned sharply. Excuse me. Harris dropped the burrito. The animal continued forward, not slowing, not looking, like a man with a purpose and no time for doubt. A patient in a wheelchair rolled out from room 212, his forepole dragging slightly behind. He squinted at the animal as it passed him. What the hell kind of hospital is this? The man muttered. Lucy rushed ahead, trying to intercept Jasper, but she couldn't bring herself to block his path. There was something in his presence, not threatening, but commanding, something that didn't make sense, and yet refused to be denied. Her radio crackled in her pocket, garbled static interrupting the usual comms. That shouldn't happen. The hospital comm system had a closed circuit. Digital. Secure. She pulled it out anyway. Security, come in. We've got, but her words cut off. The static bled into silence. She looked up. Jasper had stopped, right at the nurse's T-junction, where one hallway led to the surgical wing and the other to the maternity ward. He turned left. Instantly. No hesitation. Lucy blinked. No way. She followed. And that's when she noticed something that chilled her to the bone. The monitors in the rooms Jasper passed flickered. Not off. Not broken. Just wrong. The ECGs, the oxygen charts. Each screen fuzzed with a line of static as he went by. It was like he carried with him a pulse. A signal. Or something stronger. What is happening? She said aloud, though no one was close enough to answer. And deeper inside her, something unspoken stirred. Fear? No, not exactly. Recognition. She reached for her phone to record, but the camera app wouldn't load. Just a black screen. Meanwhile, Jasper walked past a room where a child with leukemia had been crying for hours. The child went quiet the second he passed the door. The child's mother later said it felt like someone had placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "It'll be okay." But no one was in the room. No one except her son, and a presence she couldn't name. Was Jasper just an animal? Or was he something else entirely? And if he was, why now? Why here? Why Emily? Lucy picked up her pace. She wasn't supposed to leave her station. But this wasn't just a breach of hospital protocol. This felt biblical. When she turned the corner, she saw him again, standing completely still outside room 203. That's when she froze, because she knew who was in that room. Emily Walker, pregnant, alone, unconscious, with no family, and expected to die within the next hour. Jesus, Lucy whispered under her breath, now unsure of what terrified her more. The thought that this was coincidence, or that it wasn't. Then the light above room 203's door blinked red, a sign the patient's vitals had destabilized again. Inside that room, Emily's baby hadn't moved in hours. Her pressure was dropping. They were about to start end-of-life protocols. But at the exact moment that red light blinked, Jasper raised his head and took a single step forward. Just one. Lucy felt it like a thud inside her chest. Her hand moved instinctively to her heart, like someone had tapped it from the inside. Do you believe in patterns? Coincidences? Or are there forces in this world that defy what science can measure? If Jasper had walked into any other room, no one would have questioned it. He'd have been escorted out, laughed off, forgotten by sunrise. But he didn't. He walked straight to Emily Walker, a dying woman, an unborn child, and a clock ticking down fast. And if he stopped there, at her door, what was he waiting for? No one had touched the handle yet. And Lucy, heart hammering, now faced a question she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Do I open that door or not? Room 203, maternity wing, 3:17 a.m. Emily Walker didn't look like she had minutes left to live. She looked peaceful, too peaceful. Her brown hair was still pulled into a neat bun, as if her body refused to let go of that last scrap of dignity. A thin layer of sweat glistened on her forehead. Her lips were parted slightly, barely breathing. The fetal monitor beside her flickered, one line flat, the other faint and irregular. Nurse Carol's hand trembled as she checked the foredrip. She had seen this progression before, and she hated what came next. Pressure's crashing again, she said, voice tight. 90/42. She's unresponsive to fluids. Dr. Jonathan Reed stood across the bed, arms crossed, a deep line carving the space between his brows. He was in his late 40s, respected, composed, but now he looked like a man waiting for something he didn't want to arrive. Organ systems are starting to shut down, he said grimly. If this keeps up, we'll lose both of them. Carol's eyes moved to the fetal monitor. The baby's heart rate had dipped below 90. It should have been double that. Every second mattered now, and yet time was slipping through their fingers like sand. There was no family to call, no next of kin, no husband. Emily had checked in under emergency Medicaid. No prenatal records, no prior visits, just a name and a signature. She has no one, Carol whispered. Not a single contact on file. Dr. Reed looked up sharply. No one ever just has no one, he said. Not someone this young. Then where is he? Carol asked. There was a silence in the room that neither of them dared to break. Then Carol added, almost as if to herself, she's only 32. Who gives up on someone that young? The machines beeped erratically. Emily twitched. Just once. Carol leaned closer. Emily, can you hear me? No response. Only the distant, wet thump of her failing pulse on the monitor. But what Dr. Reed couldn't know, what no one in that hospital knew, was that 3 years earlier, Emily had been engaged to a man named Michael Carter. They'd been inseparable until he crashed his motorcycle 3 blocks from their wedding venue. Since then, Emily hadn't spoken much to anyone. She moved towns, changed numbers. She hadn't been running away. She was simply surviving. Barely. The baby had been her only reason to keep breathing. And now, that baby was slipping away, just like everything else. Outside room 203, behind the glass, a gray figure stood still, watching. Jasper. No one had opened the door. Not yet. But the moment his gaze settled on Emily, something shifted. Carol's hand moved to the emergency buzzer, but she hesitated. Not because she lacked urgency, but because something in her gut was screaming that this wasn't a normal case. And what happens when medicine runs out of answers? What happens when protocol stops working? Reed took a step back from the bed and stared at the monitor. The baby's heart rate had now fallen to 78 beats per minute, then 76. He reached for the consent to intervene form, already signed in advance given Emily's state. But the second his pen touched the paper, Emily's finger twitched again. Faint, but deliberate. Then, a spike on the monitor. Heart rate jumped from 76 to 93. Carol gasped. Did you see that? Could be a reflex, Reed muttered, but his voice had lost confidence. Then another spike. Wait, that's not a fluke, Carol said. That's a rebound. She's stabilizing, Reed said, stunned. Why? What changed? Neither of them noticed that Jasper had now placed his head against the glass of the room. No one had touched her. No meds had been altered. Nothing clinical had intervened. And yet, something was changing. In the silence that followed, Reed turned to Carol and said, "Get the ear prepped. If this window holds, we might be able to save the child. But Emily, we try. For both." Carol nodded and moved fast. But before she exited the room, she glanced back one last time. And that's when she noticed it. On the fetal monitor, 2 lines had appeared. One for the baby, and one for the mother. Both rising, both synchronizing. Carol's eyes darted to the glass door. Jasper was gone. Nowhere in the hall. No hoofs. No sound. Just an empty corridor, and the unmistakable feeling that something was still inside. But how could that be? How could a dying woman, sedated and alone, rebound without intervention? How could a donkey walk to a locked door and still leave an imprint on the room without ever entering? And if this wasn't medical, was it something else? What would you believe? If everything logical had already been disproven? Room 203, maternity wing, 3:22 a.m. The door was never opened. At least, no one remembered opening it. One moment Jasper stood behind the glass, still, watchful, like a statue that had been carved from instinct. The next, he was inside, not barging in, not kicking it down, just there. Carol blinked first. "Did you open?" Dr. Reed shook his head slowly. "No." "Then how?" "I don't know." But the truth was, they both did know. Not logically, not in a way you could document, but in the place between breath and belief. Jasper walked with purpose again, past the foot of the bed, past the crash cart, past the sterile equipment that couldn't help anymore. He stopped at Emily's side. Her belly rose, barely. Her lips were blue. The baby wasn't moving. Carol's hand hovered near the red emergency button, but she didn't press it, because Jasper lowered his head, slowly, deliberately, and pressed his fuzzy gray snout, with a single white spot just above his nostrils, against the bare skin of Emily's pregnant belly. Everyone froze. Even the air, even time. The monitor beeped once, then again, then rapid fire. Beep, 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 beep. Heart rate rising. Fetal distress vanishing. Emily's oxygen saturation, which had hovered at 79%, suddenly climbed to 85, then 90, then 96. Dr. Reed stumbled back, nearly knocking over the tray table. "What the hell?" Carol's voice cracked. "Her vitals, they're syncing with the baby's. That's not possible." "No, John," she said, eyes wide with terror and awe. "That's not natural." Emily stirred, only slightly, but more than before. A twitch in her foot, a movement in her lips, then a sound, a fractured whisper. "Michael," Carol gasped. "You heard that, right?" Dr. Reed nodded. "Yeah, I did. But here's the thing. There were no new medications, no adrenaline, no surgical intervention. Only the donkey, only Jasper. And the room felt different. The fluorescent lights stopped flickering. The pressure in the air shifted. The clattering drip of the four suddenly sounded steady, purposeful, almost musical, as if the entire room had realigned around something invisible. Jasper didn't move. His snout remained against Emily's belly. His eyes were closed. But what no one in that room could see was that in room 412, 2 floors above, Michael Carter opened his eyes, just for a second, enough to register one word on his monitor. A name. Emily. The nurse in the ICU screamed and dropped the chart, because Michael's vitals weren't just improving, they were mimicking hers. Same beats per minute, same blood pressure fluctuations, as if something beneath their skin, something deeper than love or biology, had begun to link them again. But why? How? And what did this animal, this donkey, have to do with it? Was he channeling something or guiding it? And if so, what had chosen Jasper as the messenger? Just as Dr. Reed stepped toward the bed, Jasper slowly pulled his head back. He looked up, straight into Carol's eyes. And Carol, hard-nosed, level-headed, grief-hardened Carol, began to cry, because she recognized that look. It was the same look her father gave her when he passed away holding her hand at the VA hospital in 2007. Not a look of pain, not even comfort, a look of knowledge. of seeing something no human eye could catch. Then Jasper turned, walked to the door. Still no one touched it. And the moment his hooves crossed the threshold, Emily opened her eyes, fully, consciously, breath rushing in, as if she had just surfaced from the bottom of the sea. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice raw. Carol rushed to her side. "You're in St. Hope. You were... Emily, you were crashing. But you're back. You're back." Emily looked around, dazed, then down at her stomach. "The baby, he's strong. So are you." Dr. Reed stepped back, still trying to reconcile the readings, his mind searching for an answer that shouldn't exist. And in the hallway, Jasper had vanished. Again, no trace, no sound, only wet hoof prints fading against the floor. But this raises a question no one could answer, not even the most brilliant minds in the hospital. What, exactly, had entered room 203? And if it wasn't just a donkey, what was it trying to awaken? Room 203, maternity wing, 3:27 a.m. The room had fallen still again. Jasper was gone, vanished the same way he had appeared, without sound, without explanation, without anyone touching the door. But what he left behind wasn't absence. It was change. The heart monitor beside Emily no longer coughed out erratic, broken beeps. It pulsed, rhythmically, powerfully. Thump, 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 thump. Her oxygen had stabilized, blood pressure rising, baby's heart rate holding strong. But none of it, could prepare Carol for what came next. It started small, a flicker of muscle around Emily's mouth. Then her lower lip moved, not randomly, intentionally. Carol leaned in. "Emily." Nothing. She placed her fingers gently on Emily's wrist. Warmth had returned. Not much, but it was there. Life had come back from somewhere. Then again, another twitch at the lips. This time, unmistakable. She was trying to speak. Carol reached for Dr. Reed's sleeve. "John, look." He turned, eyes already wide from watching the monitor. "She's communicating. She's trying to say something." Carol bent low. "Emily, it's Carol. If you can hear me, squeeze my fingers." No movement. But then, her throat shifted, a rasping sound, like air dragging across gravel. A whisper breath. And then, "Michael." Carol pulled back, hand over her mouth. She said it. She whispered. She said his name. Dr. Reed looked up from the chart in disbelief. No stimulation. No drugs. She shouldn't even be conscious. She's not. That's what's impossible. Carol backed away from the bed slowly. It's like something reached in and pulled her out. Reed looked at the screen again. Or someone. They didn't say his name out loud. They didn't need to. They both looked at the faint hoof prints still fading on the tile near the door. Upstairs in room 412, Michael's body shifted again. Not just a twitch this time, a flinch. His hands clenched briefly. His eyes fluttered beneath their lids. His brain, once cold and silent, now sparked, tiny flashes igniting on the scan like stars in a dead sky. Back in room 203, Carol sat next to Emily, staring at her chest rise and fall. She wasn't just surviving now. She was returning. But here's what made no sense. Her sedation had not worn off. The drug was still active. The dosage was heavy. There was no medical justification for what they were witnessing. Unless something deeper had been triggered. But what? That's when Carol made a decision that would later cost her job. She closed the curtain, shut off the hallway camera, sat by Emily's bed, and began to speak. "Emily, I don't know who or what that animal was, but he came here for you, and I saw you fight. I saw something in you light back up." Carol leaned closer. "You said Michael's name. Do you know where you are? Do you remember what happened?" Emily didn't answer, but her fingers twitched. Once, twice, patterned, deliberate. Reed noticed. "Carol." Morse code. Carol turned to him, stunned. "I don't know, maybe." It felt like a beat, a rhythm. He grabbed a pen and started marking the pattern. Long pause. Too short. Pause. Another short, then long. "Could be nothing," he said. Or... Then he stopped. "What is it?" Carol asked. Reed showed her the notes. "It spells he's waiting." "He's waiting? Who?" Carol stepped back again, her breath catching in her throat. Was she hallucinating? No. The monitor was still real. The vitals were real. The baby's heartbeat still strong. Emily was back. But what did she come back from? And what, or who, had been on the other side? Then came the real twist. Carol turned to adjust the force stand. That's when she noticed something etched into the side of the fore pump. It hadn't been there before. She swore it, but now it was clear, as if scratched in by something blunt but firm. 2 letters. MC. Carol's entire body went cold. Michael Carter, she whispered. Dr. Reed looked pale. No one's been in this room except us. I didn't write that. Neither did I. They both stared at it in silence. And then came the moment that would haunt Carol forever. The fetal monitor spiked again, only when the letters were spoken aloud. Michael Carter. 2 lives. 1 line. 1 message. 1 donkey that appeared out of nowhere, broke every rule of reality, and then left without a trace. Was Jasper a symbol? A sign? Or was he something else entirely? And now the biggest question. If he came once, will he come back? And if so, what will he want next? ICU, room 412, 3:27 a.m. The beep of the monitor had been a lonely sound for 19 days. Steady, mechanical, empty. Michael Carter had been declared functionally brain dead. There were still vitals, yes, but barely. His EEG was flat for over a week. Hope had exited this room long ago. In its place, resignation. That cold, sterile kind doctors and nurses were like a second uniform. Until now. Nurse Jake had just finished checking room 410 when something caught his eye, a flicker of movement from the corner of room 412. He turned, confused, and stopped. Michael's left hand had moved, not spasmed, not convulsed. It flexed, opened, closed, with intention. Jake stepped in slowly, unsure if he was hallucinating or overtired. Mr. Carter. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. Jake leaned over the bed and whispered, Michael, if you can hear me, blink. Nothing. But then, his right pinky twitched. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. That wasn't random. He hit the call button so hard the plastic cracked. Code green, room 412. I've got movement in a coma patient. I repeat, code green. Dr. Bennett arrived 60 seconds later, eyes red from sleep, lab coat half buttoned. He scanned the monitors first, then looked at Michael's body. Vitals. Stable, actually improving. BP's up, pulse climbing, temps normalizing. You sure it wasn't a seizure? No. The movement was slow, coordinated, like he was trying to reach for something. Dr. Bennett moved to the head of the bed and pulled out a pen light. Michael, if you can hear me, blink once. No reaction, but his pulse increased. A deep, persistent beeping. Check the pupils. Jake did. Both reactive. Then the monitors surged again. Oxygen intake spiking. Jake said, Is someone venting in the room? No. We're sealed. Then something bizarre happened. The monitor reading on Michael's EKG matched the fetal heart rate from room 203. Exactly. Same pace. Same rhythm. A perfect echo. Dr. Bennett stared at the numbers, mouth slightly open. Jake was already on the phone. Get OB on the line. We need confirmation. Compare readings from room 203 to ICU 412. Why? Said a tech stepping in. Because, Jake replied, voice tightening, I think this guy's heart is sinking with his unborn child. Dr. Bennett sat down slowly, staring at the man in the bed. How is that even? Then Michael opened his eyes. They were bloodshot, dazed, but aware. His gaze moved, tracked the ceiling, then the lights. And then, he locked onto Jake. Jake stepped forward carefully. Michael, can you speak? Michael's mouth twitched. A noise escaped. It was dry like rust against stone. Then came a word. One word. No. Jake looked at Bennett. No what? Michael tried again. Don't let it. His voice was thin, like something from under the earth. Bennett leaned in. Don't let what? Michael's jaw trembled. Then the monitor screamed. Heart rate, 164. Oxygen dropped to 87. Jake reached for the crash cart. He's crashing again. No, wait. Bennett barked. Look at his face. Michael's eyes were wide, not from pain, from fear. His voice came again, clearer this time. She's not safe. Ooh, Emily. He didn't say her name, but everyone knew. Back in room 203, Emily clutched her abdomen. Her eyes went wide. She gasped. Something's wrong. Carol was at her side in an instant. You're okay. The baby's okay. Emily shook her head. No, not me. Him. What do you mean? She grabbed Carol's wrist. He saw something. Carol froze. Who? Emily stared at the ceiling, voice shaking. Michael. He saw it when he was gone. Upstairs, Michael gripped the side of the bed with strength he shouldn't have had. Don't let it come back. Let what come back? Michael didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the closed door of the ICU. And, for a brief moment, so did Jake. Because there, just beyond the window, a shadow moved. Not a person, not a nurse. Something lower. Still, unblinking. But when Jake opened the door to check, nothing was there. Just a faint, damp hoofprint on the tile. If Michael was in a coma, who gave him that message? And if Jasper was gone, Wells came through. Room 203, 3:31 a.m. Jasper stood still beside Emily's hospital bed, the kind of stillness that didn't belong to an animal, not even to a creature of instinct or habit. No restless twitching, no shifting weight from hoof to hoof, no sniffing, just still. Statues weren't this still. Soldiers in perfect formation couldn't hold posture like that. It was as if he was listening. Carol remained frozen, one hand still clutching Emily's wrist, the other hovering near the emergency button. Forgotten. She should have called someone. She should have run a scan, checked the vitals again, radioed for psych consult, or at least security. But she didn't move, because Jasper's eyes were locked on Emily's face. Not her stomach, not her scent, not any of the things an animal might normally react to. Just her face. Carol swallowed. His gaze wasn't blank, wasn't confused or alert in the way prey animals usually are. It was aware. She leaned back slightly and watched him. Emily was breathing deeper now, more evenly, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. But the strangest thing wasn't what Emily was doing. It was what Jasper wasn't doing. He wasn't reacting. He was witnessing, watching her like a teacher watching a student grasp something for the first time, or like an old friend waiting for the exact right moment to speak. But he didn't speak, because he didn't need to. Carol couldn't take it anymore. She broke the silence. Her voice cracked with something between awe and fear. You knew, she said softly, her throat tightening. You knew, didn't you? Jasper didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. But there was something in his expression. That look, that impossible look. It reminded Carol of her mother, the day before she died, lying in hospice, smiling at the wall with eyes that weren't looking at anything in the room, but something beyond it, something that couldn't be seen, only felt. A presence, a certainty. Carol wiped her face. She hadn't even realized she was crying. Who are you? She whispered. It wasn't rhetorical. She genuinely needed to know. Because what kind of animal steps into a maternity ward during a storm, finds the one dying woman no one had hoped for, touches her once, and brings her back, and now just stands beside her, silently like a priest keeping vigil? Was Jasper more than he seemed? Had he been sent? And if so, by what? Jasper finally blinked. Once. Then he shifted just slightly, his body moving closer to the bed, head bowed gently over Emily's hand. Not the belly, not the child. Her hand, like he was thanking her. But for what? Carol took a step forward, unable to shake the feeling that she was interrupting something sacred. Why Emily? She asked aloud. Jasper didn't move, but Emily stirred again. This time her hand twitched and curled up toward Jasper's snout. Carol watched, breath caught in her throat as her fingers brushed his fur, and he leaned into it, like he'd been waiting for her to acknowledge him. Not the other way around. Not a rescuer, not a guardian, but something deeper, something older, something connected. A beeping sound from the machine snapped Carol back into motion. The fetal monitor's reading surged upward, blood flow improving, oxygenation steady. But then, just as Carol reached for the chart, Jasper looked at her. Directly. Eyes locked. Deep. Still. And in that stare was something Carol could never explain. A warning. She felt it, not heard it. Like the moment when a storm shifts in the distance, but hasn't yet arrived. When the birds stop singing. When your instincts scream without words. And just like that, Jasper turned, walked slowly toward the door. But before reaching it, he stopped, lifted his head, and stared at the ceiling. Right above them, room 412. Carol followed his gaze. And in that exact second, a code blue rang out over the hospital intercom. Room 412. ICU. Michael. Carol's stomach dropped. She looked back at Emily, still stable. The baby, still fine. But Jasper wasn't looking at them anymore. He was focused on whatever was happening above. Was it starting again? Had Jasper not come to save, but to delay something darker? And if so, what came next? And why was he staring at the ceiling like he already knew? Emergency staging room. Converted trauma bay. 3:36 a.m. The air was too still. Not peaceful, dangerously still. Dr. Jonathan Reed pulled off his gloves with a snap, flinging them into the biohazard bin with more force than necessary. His jaw was tight, his brow soaked. His chest didn't rise the way it should after a breath. It heaved, as if each inhalation had a fight for space inside him. On the monitor, Emily's vitals held steady. Miraculously so, almost unnaturally so. But Reed knew what that meant. "You see this," he barked to the two techs prepping the mobile surgical kit. "This is a plateau. It's a window, but it won't last." Carol stepped in behind him, still visibly shaken from the last few minutes in room 203. Her eyes darted to the numbers on the screen. "She stabilized, John. Why not let her rest? Just for an hour." He turned to her. "You think this will hold an hour? She's sitting on a razor's edge. And if she crashes again during labor, we lose both." Carol didn't argue. She didn't have to, because she knew what he wasn't saying. This wasn't just a medical call. It was a gamble. The kind doctors avoid until there's nothing left to lose. Reed pressed a hand against the wall, bracing himself, staring down at the patient through the thin sterile curtain that barely separated her from the trauma bay's blinking machines and shadows. "She has no family," he muttered. "No next of kin. No legal guardian. She's unconscious. But I have her signed directive from intake. Do whatever is necessary to save the baby." He turned to Carol. "That's consent." Carol nodded, but her voice was hoarse. "If we do this, and something goes wrong," Reed finished for her, "we'll have taken her last moment of peace." When the tech stepped closer, "Dr. Reed." Fetal heart rate just dipped again. Reed looked at the monitor. It was faint, barely, but it had dropped. Just a few points. Just enough to feel the cold tip of panic push into his gut. "Prep the kit. Local anesthesia. External stim ready. Call up OB for crash assist. Give me the neonatal team now." Carol whispered, "We're really doing this." Reed didn't even look at her. "We're out of time. We either take this shot, or we lose them both." Down the hall, an intern named Mason, barely 24, hands trembling from being told to assist, fumbled with the sterile packs. "Doctor, we've never done a C-section in this bay. There's not even a full sterile field." Reed cut him off. "You want a sterile field or a living baby?" Mason shut up. Carol leaned in toward Emily, brushing the hair from her face. "You came back once. Come back again. Please." Emily didn't respond, but a single tear slid down the side of her face. Reed snapped on fresh gloves. Scalpel. But before anyone could pass it, a blackout. Instant. The entire emergency bay plunged into darkness. Machines powered off. Screens blinked out. All at once. Silence. Then the backup generator kicked in, jerking the lights to low power red. Reed's face was caught in a glow. Pale. Tight. Carol stepped back. "What just happened?" "I don't know. Hospital grids on auto switchover. This base should have stayed powered." "Tech, the ICU's down too." "Michael," Carol whispered. That's when they heard it. Hoofsteps. Faint. Heavy. Deliberate. Not from the hallway. Above them. Coming from the ceiling. "Tech, is there construction on the roof?" "Reed, no." Then a crash. Somewhere upstairs. Reed pointed at Mason. "We don't wait. Lights or not. Start the procedure. Mason hesitated. But the power. Reed stepped forward, voice hard and cold. Do you want to tell her baby's corpse that we waited on a fuse box? Mason moved. Carol gripped Emily's hand, squeezing tight. Whatever you are, wherever you are, she whispered to no one in particular. You brought her this far. Don't stop now. And that's when Emily, eyes still shut, gripped Carol's hand back. Not a twitch, not a reflex. A grip, strong, like she was holding on to something, or someone. Carol looked up slowly, because she suddenly had the feeling. They weren't alone in the room, but there was nothing. No shadow, no sound, only the hum of machines restarting. And a hoof print, right beside the surgical table. Still wet, but no one had walked in. What stopped the power? What moved above them? And if Jasper had returned, was he still here? Or had something else come through with him? St. Hope Memorial, makeshift labor room, 3:46 a.m. The lights flickered dim red as the emergency power pulsed just enough to keep the machines breathing. The fetal monitor screamed with a shrill irregularity, a digital heartbeat of a child who hadn't yet seen the world but was already fighting like he'd inherited a war. Emily's skin was clammy, flushed with heat. Tubes and electrodes connected her to a fragile web of machines that barely managed to simulate stability. Dr. Reed's voice cut the air with a tone sharp enough to make steel flinch. We've got minutes, maybe less. His hands were prepped. The surgical tray was half-lit. Tools gleamed under the backup lights like quiet threats. Carol hovered at Emily's side, her hands resting on the woman's temple, fingers shaking more than she'd admit. She had done this 100 times, watched women teeter between life and loss. But not like this. Not with a power outage. Not with a Genet's hoof print still drying on the tile. Not with whatever that thing was moving on the roof. Then Emily moved. The first real movement since she'd spoken Michael's name. Her lips parted, dry and cracked. A whisper so faint Carol leaned all the way in, ear nearly to her mouth. Where am I? Carol's heart dropped. She sat up too fast, breath hitching. Emily, you're awake. Dr. Reed didn't even look up. We don't have time for sentiment. But Carol wasn't listening to him. She was staring into the wide, barely focused brown eyes of a woman returning from someplace far darker than sleep. Emily winced, her brows knitting as she tried to sit up, only for pain to wrench through her body. What's happening? Carol held her hand, firm but gentle. You've been unconscious. You and the baby. It's been critical. We almost lost you. Emily's eyes darted around, registering the machines, the masked faces, the gleaming blades. Is he okay? She asked, voice hoarse. Dr. Reed answered without looking at her. We're trying to make sure of that, but we need to act now. Emily locked eyes with Carol. Then she did something that made the room pause. She pulled out her oxygen mask. Carol tried to stop her. Emily. But Emily's voice, broken, scratchy, cut through the air like glass under pressure. No one cuts me open unless I say so. Reed froze. You signed consent, he muttered. I know what I signed, she rasped. But that was before I came back. Carol whispered. What brought you back, Emily? Emily's chest rose. Her eyes shifted toward the empty corner of the room, where nothing stood, but where Jasper had been. I heard him, she said. He, the one with the eyes. Reed snapped. She's delirious. Someone sedate her again. No, Carol said. John, wait. Reed stared at her. You're not actually entertaining this. Carol's voice was calm, firmer than before. She's awake, coherent, and fighting. Maybe we should listen before we act like we know what this is. Emily sat up straighter, fighting the pain. Her voice came back stronger now. Too strong for a woman who was clinically dying 10 minutes ago. I'm not supposed to survive this. The silence fell hard. Dr. Reed exhaled. What did you say? Emily blinked, eyes suddenly glossy with something heavier than fear. 3 weeks ago, I was diagnosed. Stage 4. The cancer started in my liver. Spread everywhere. Carol's knees buckled slightly. Why didn't you tell anyone? I did, Emily replied. But I signed something else too. Something I hoped no one would ever have to read. Reed stepped closer, stunned. You came in as an emergency patient. There was nothing on your chart. Emily looked at him and whispered, because I destroyed it. Everything. All records. She reached for Carol again. I wanted the baby to have a chance, even if I didn't. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the monitors screamed again. The baby's heart rate dropped to 68. Reed turned on his heel. That's it. Talking time is over. He grabbed the scalpel. Carol's hand shot out. Stop. Reed turned to her, furious. What now? Carol pointed to Emily. She's pushing. Reed blinked. What? She's not coding. She's pushing. They looked back. And yes, Emily was screaming now, body arched, teeth gritted, fingers clawing at the bed. She's going into labor. Naturally, Carol said, breathless. But that's... Reed stumbled. She wasn't dilated. She wasn't contracting. Check again. He did, and went pale. 8 centimeters. The backup power flickered again. The air shifted. Somewhere outside the room, something moved. Another hoof step, another shadow. Or was it something worse? Emily gasped. He's here again. Carol looked toward the door, terrified. Who? Emily didn't answer. Instead, she screamed, and the baby began to crown. If the impossible had brought her back, then what had followed it here? And if it came for life once? What will it take in return? Improvised surgical bay, 3:59 a.m. Time dilated in strange ways when death sat in the room. Seconds grew thick. Minutes refused to pass. But now, everything moved too fast. Emily was crowning. Carol's gloves were on, arms elbow deep in sweat, adrenaline, and disbelief. Her heart thundered in her chest, but her hands were still. Dr. Reed stood just behind her, voice calm, clipped, reduced to single-word commands. Clamp, suction, monitor. The entire team moved like a clock built from nerves and ritual. Only there was no ritual for this. No textbook for a patient with metastatic cancer, pushing through full labor without medication. No surgical protocol for a birth announced by hoof prints and preceded by blackout. No logic, just instinct and fear and something else. Faith, not in science, not in God, in her. Emily was screaming now, guttural, primal, the kind of scream that tears through a body already broken but not defeated. Push, Emily, Carol barked, her voice louder than the monitors, louder than the fear. You're almost there. One more. I swear. Another push. Blood. Fluid. Tension. Then, a sound. Not from Emily. From him. Carol's breath caught as a cry filled the room. Strong. Fierce. Not the whimper of a fragile newborn. A roar of a beginning. A boy alive. Very alive. Red and screaming and wriggling against the towel. Lungs wide open like he already had something to say. Reed pulled off his mask. It's a boy. Carol choked on her own voice. He's healthy. Apgar's excellent. Emily collapsed back into the bed, sobbing with relief and pain in equal measure. But the sound that followed wasn't hers. It was hooves. Not loud. Not close. Just present. Somewhere just beyond the hall. Someone peeked out of the door. There's an animal outside the urine trance. Carol didn't turn. She already knew. Bring him to her, she told Reed. He hesitated. Carol didn't wait. She cradled the child, so small, yet filled with something enormous, and placed him against Emily's chest. When their skin touched, Emily cried louder than she had during labor. Her hands clutched the baby like he was the only thing anchoring her to this side of reality. And maybe he was. I didn't think I'd get this, she gasped. I didn't think I'd make it. You did, Carol said, crouching beside her. You did this. No, Emily replied, eyes still red. He did. Carol followed her gaze. The hallway, empty, but down the sterile tile trail, faint and undeniable, hoof prints. Outside, beneath the emergency lights of the bay entrance, Jasper stood, still, calm, his head tilted slightly, not with surprise, but with recognition. He didn't bray, didn't pace, didn't move forward. He simply nodded once, as if to say, it's done. And then he turned, walked into the night like a soldier dismissed. But inside the ore, As the baby's cries finally softened into breathless coos, something else caught Carol's eye. The birth certificate clipboard, untouched, still blank, and yet, written in black ink, in perfect cursive. His name is Elias. No one had written it. Not Reed. Not Carol. Not Emily. No pen lay nearby. No hand had moved. Emily, Carol said slowly. Did you choose a name? Emily frowned. No, I never got that far. Carol showed her the page. Her eyes widened. That's my grandfather's name. I've never said it out loud. Reed said nothing. He was already looking at the clock, the surgical bay, the monitors, trying to process something his medical training couldn't begin to touch. But he'd say it later, when he was alone. That birth wasn't ours. And if Jasper was gone, if Elias had survived, if Emily had been brought back from a death sentence, what price had been paid for that life? Because not everything that gives leaves empty-handed. ICU, 4:01 a.m., St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, Ohio. The room was designed to mute life. No sunlight, no color, no sound beyond the machine that counted Michael's heartbeats for him. 1, 2, 3. Every second was a negotiation between existence and absence. His body, motionless. His eyelids, heavy, closed for almost 2 weeks. The respirator, his only voice. Until now. At the exact moment a cry shattered the silence down the hall, something subtle shifted in room 509. A tremor in Michael's index finger. So slight, the monitors didn't even register it. But the nurse did. Rita Delgado had been working in ICUs for 18 years. She'd seen hopeless cases turn the tide. She'd also seen families torn apart waiting for miracles that never came. She never flinched. But tonight, her hand froze halfway through adjusting his 4. Because his left eye was open and moving. Michael, she whispered, not with doubt, but with urgency. He blinked once. Slow, deliberate. Monitors began to spike. Not dangerously, just differently. Like a rhythm, finally remembering its melody. She grabbed his hand. Michael, can you hear me? Squeeze my fingers. Nothing. Then, a twitch. A breath. A name. Not shouted. Not spoken. Exhaled. Emily. Rita staggered back, hand over her chest. Oh my God. She bolted to the intercom. Get Dr. Salter in here. Now. The coma patient just came out. He just spoke. He's awake. Static. A pause. Then, repeat that. He's awake. And he said her name. But how? How does a man without brain activity for nearly 2 weeks wake up at the exact moment his child takes his first breath? And how does he know her name? He hadn't heard anyone speak it. No visitors had been allowed. Emily had been listed as Jane Doe when she was brought in. So who told him? In another part of the hospital, Carol still held Elias in her arms, gently rocking him. Emily had fallen asleep, her chest rising and falling in slow relief. The baby curled beside her like a small miracle she wasn't ready to question. Carol checked the time. 4:01 a.m. She exhaled, brushing Elias' cheek. But before she could speak, a code was called over the loudspeaker. Room 509. Michael's room. Carol froze. She knew that voice. She'd been on that team when Michael was admitted. She had seen his vitals crash twice. She'd seen his CT scans, dead zones where memory, speech, identity should have lived. She had called a lost cause. So why did the hallway now echo with nurses running toward him? Why did every hair on her arms rise? And why was Elias now staring at the doorway as if something, or someone, was coming? Inside room 509, Dr. Salter examined Michael with the hesitation of a man afraid reality might vanish under closer inspection. But it didn't. Michael's eyes tracked movement. His pupils responded. He followed instructions. He moved his lips. And then he repeated the name. Emily. How do you know that name? Salter asked carefully. Michael's gaze didn't shift. His voice, though barely audible, carried something sharper than clarity. I saw her. Saw her. The doctor repeated. Where? Michael didn't answer right away. He turned his head, slowly, toward the ceiling, and said, He led me to her. Who? Salter asked. Michael blinked once. then said a word that made no sense. Not to the doctors, not to the nurses, not to anyone in that room, except maybe one person several floors below. Because the word wasn't a name. It was a description, a single, soft word. Donkey. A minute later, Carol received a text from Rita Delgado, the nurse in 509. It read, "You said Emily had no emergency contacts. We just had a man in the ICU wake up out of nowhere and say her name. You better come see this." Carol stood frozen, staring at the text, then back at the baby. Elias was no longer asleep. He was watching her, eyes wide open. And in that moment, Carol didn't feel like the nurse, or the caretaker, or even the witness. She felt like the one being watched, like the child already knew. But that wasn't the most disturbing thing. The real question was this: if the man who almost died just awoke and spoke the name of the woman who was supposed to have no family, then who had been lying? And if Emily's memories had vanished during the trauma, what would come back first, her past or her pain? Because one of them was already standing at the door. Room 214B, maternity ward, 5:03 a.m. The room was still, not silent, but still, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Emily lay back against the hospital bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale and drawn, eyes struggling to stay open. She looked like someone who had crossed the desert barefoot, only to arrive and realize the destination hurt more than the path. Carol sat beside her, hands steady, voice gentle, but her eyes, unblinking, focused, watchful. She didn't speak. Not yet. Not until Emily asked the question. But Emily didn't ask, because the answer was already moving in her direction. Wrapped in a light blue hospital blanket, the infant was carried forward, tiny, squirming, warm, and breathing. The moment the baby was laid in her arms, Emily flinched, as if the weight of him activated something buried too deep to name. She stared, wide-eyed, uncertain. Was she afraid of him, or of what he made her feel? Her fingers, trembling, brushed his cheek. He turned instinctively. That primal, undeniable surge for comfort, connection, milk, life. She laughed, just once, broken and wet, before pressing her forehead to his. Her arms instinctively curled around him. Then it came. Not a scream, not a breakdown, just the softest, most guttural sound she had made since arriving. A sob. It rose from a place beneath words, beneath comprehension. The cry of someone who had fought to survive, only to realize she had no idea what to do with the survival. And, through cracked lips, she said it. A sentence born from ash and breath. "You made it, my love." Then again, softer. "You won." But what had he won against? Was it the labor, the desertion, the silence, or something far older, more buried? Carol stood still. The room was dim now, save for a single light above the bed. She observed Emily with a strange weight in her chest. Not quite relief. Not yet. Because Carol knew things. Things she hadn't told Emily. Like the man who had woken from a coma at the exact moment Elias was born. Like the name he had whispered. Like the animal he claimed had guided him back. And like the identification card Carol had found buried deep in a bag marked Jane Doe. A card that said Emily Rose Whitaker, age 28, address in rural Montana. Next of kin, Michael Whitaker. Carol hadn't said a word, because she didn't know who Emily really was. And maybe Emily didn't either. The baby's hand opened and closed against Emily's chest, searching, claiming, knowing. And suddenly Emily stiffened. Her body, which had just surrendered to softness, now locked. Her breathing shortened. Her gaze shifted, not to the child but past him, toward the door, as if she felt something there. Not a person, a presence. "Carol." Emily's voice cracked. "There's someone watching." Carol turned. No one. Nothing. Just a hallway, dark and empty, the late-night shift changing guard. Machines humming. Lives happening behind thin white curtains. "No one's there, sweetie," Carol said softly. "Just you and him. You're safe." But Emily didn't relax. Because some part of her, some part she didn't remember choosing, was already convinced that someone had followed her here. But who? 5 floors above, in the ICU, Michael's vitals had stabilized. He hadn't spoken again, not a word since that one. But now, as the nurse dimmed his lights, preparing for the next rotation, he turned his head slightly on the pillow. His eyes opened. They were glassy, but alive, and they were looking not at the ceiling, not at the nurse, at the door. Just before she switched the lights off, she heard him breathe out something soft, a number, 214. She frowned. Room 214. But Michael had already closed his eyes. Back in the maternity room, Emily slowly rocked the infant. She still didn't know his name, but he did, because when she looked into his eyes, something deep inside her cracked, and it wasn't from pain. It was from recognition, not of his features or the sound of his breath, but from the feeling that whatever this child had brought into the world wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because what if the miracle wasn't just that they both survived? What if the miracle had followed them? What if the one thing they thought they escaped was already here? Hospital corridor, level 2, 6:19 a.m. The wheels of a chair made a soft humming noise as they moved across the linoleum floor. That was all Michael could hear. No voices, no beeping machines, just that sound, slow and rhythmic, like the ticking of something ancient coming back to life. He was conscious, fully alert, but not entirely sure how. Every part of his body still felt as if it belonged to a different version of himself, a version that had gone to sleep in shame and woken up in something resembling grace. If you asked him to explain what had changed, he couldn't, but one thing burned behind his eyes. Room 214. He hadn't asked to be wheeled there. He hadn't told the nurse why. He just said the number, and something in the way he said it made the nurse obey without question. Was it possible to miss a moment you hadn't lived yet? As the elevator doors opened, Michael's eyes adjusted to the hallway lighting. It was golden, too warm for a hospital, too familiar. For a second, he thought he might be hallucinating, but the number on the door was real, 214B. The nurse paused. "You sure?" Michael nodded once. What would he possibly say? That he felt her here? That he had heard his son before he even knew he had won? Would they believe that? Would she? Inside the room, Emily didn't notice the door open at first. She was fixated on the baby's tiny fingers. She traced the curve of his ear, his lashes, his jawline. He was sleeping now, chest rising like the ocean before a storm. Carol stood nearby, arms crossed, watching, ready to step in. But not yet. She could feel something hovering between them, as if a thread was about to pull taut. Then, the sound of wheels, and a breath, one she hadn't heard in almost a year. Emily turned and froze. Michael's hands clutched the sides of the chair. His eyes widened, not in panic, in disbelief. She looked different, not just older, not just thinner, stronger, and the child in her arms. God, he looked like both of them. Tears didn't fall right away. They waited, like they, too, needed permission to exist again. Michael tried to speak. The first time, it didn't come out. He cleared his throat. Then finally, "You're here, both of you." Emily didn't answer. Her face didn't soften. She just stared, because something inside her refused to believe this was real. Could you forgive a man who vanished when you needed him most, just because he showed up with tears in his eyes? Could love truly be buried and still breathe? Michael wheeled closer, 1 inch at a time. He didn't ask to hold the baby. He didn't dare. His name. He asked softly. Emily hesitated. "I haven't chosen one yet." Michael nodded. "Can I just see him?" She tilted the baby toward him. Only slightly. Enough. Michael leaned forward. And then, the baby opened his eyes. Just for a moment. As if some deep, primal instinct told him, "This man matters." Michael covered his mouth, choked. He didn't deserve this. He knew what he had done. He remembered the text he never answered. The night he walked out. The moment he thought disappearing would be easier than facing himself. But now the consequences had a face. "Emily," he whispered, voice cracking. "I thought I lost you forever." She still hadn't cried, because the real tears, they weren't for loss. They were for uncertainty, because now came the impossible part. What comes next? But then something shifted. Carol stepped out into the hallway. She had been silent the whole time, but now she leaned against the wall and let out a breath. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. Then she pulled out her phone, typed something, paused, then deleted it. Because the truth she had been carrying, the one buried deep, was bigger than just Michael and Emily. It involved the donor registry, a match from 3 states away, a woman with no family, and a child who wasn't supposed to make it past the 3rd trimester. The reunion had happened, but the real question wasn't if they would forgive. It was what had really brought them back together. And who else knew? Hospital conference room, 8:47 a.m. Dr. Reed sat in the far end of the long rectangular table, his hands clasped tighter than usual, thumbs pressed so hard together they turned pale. The room buzzed with the artificial hum of overhead lights, but not a single person spoke. Carol sat 2 seats away. She looked different than she had during the delivery. That Carol was all action, steady, clinical, vital. This Carol looked like she had seen something that broke the frame of logic she spent a lifetime building. Across from them, the hospital director, Evelyn Monroe, tapped her pen against a closed file. Not her usual confident rhythm. This was slower, more deliberate, like each tap measured the weight of disbelief. Then she finally asked, "Explain it again, from the beginning." Reed adjusted his glasses. "You've already read the report. I want to hear it. In your words." He glanced at Carol. She gave the faintest nod, and that was enough. "I entered the ER at 5:52, he began. Vitals were crashing. We were losing Emily and the baby simultaneously. Blood pressure was unstable. We were seconds from calling time of death on the fetus when..." He paused. Carol leaned forward. "You can say it." He did. "When we heard the donkey." Silence. No one dared make a sound, though the word itself felt absurd hanging in the sterile air of a hospital conference room. "You're saying an animal interrupted the procedure?" "No, I'm saying it entered with purpose, like it was drawn to something." Monroe raised a brow. "That's a strong word, doctor, and yet I don't have a better one." Carol added, "I don't believe in signs. But that animal walked past 4 security doors, avoided every crash cart and obstacle in its path, and stopped at operating room 3, just outside. Then something changed. Vitals stabilized. Just enough. Emily's oxygen climbed within safe range. The baby's heart rate returned. We thought we lost him. I was already prepared to make the call. But then he kicked. Like he knew. Monroe tapped the file again. Still closed. And Michael. Reed removed his glasses and let them drop to the table. Michael regained consciousness in the ICU at the exact second the baby cried for the first time. You can check the logs. The timestamps match to the second. No one moved. Because how could that be a coincidence? Monroe finally opened the folder. But instead of reading it, she asked, "Is there a medical explanation?" Reed didn't respond. Carol did. Not one that holds. The director set the file down, looked each of them in the eye. "I've worked in hospitals for over 30 years. I've seen things we don't publish. I've seen mothers deliver premature twins who shouldn't survive and walk out with both. I've seen flatlines reverse themselves. But this..." She tapped the file again, softer this time. "This is something else." And then she asked the question neither Reed nor Carol wanted to answer. "Should we make this public?" Reed blinked. "Are you asking me if I think people are ready for a story where a donkey saves 2 lives and triggers a synchronized recovery? I'm asking you what happens if we don't tell it." Carol shifted in her seat. Her voice was quiet, steady. "People will find out. You can't bury something like this." Monroe leaned back, and what she said next changed the tone completely. "You think this was divine intervention?" Reed opened his mouth, closed it. Carol bit her lower lip. Neither said yes. Neither said no. And that hesitation was louder than agreement. Monroe slowly closed the folder again. Then she looked up. Her voice dropped a register. "I want the security footage. Everything. From the minute that donkey entered the building to the second it left." Carol swallowed. "It didn't leave." "What do you mean?" "It vanished. No one saw it leave. Not the guards, not the staff. We have footage of it entering, but not a single frame of it after the delivery." Monroe froze. "So it walked into the hallway, helped save 2 lives. And then what?" disappeared. No one answered. Because there was no answer. Just a hole where certainty used to be. And then Monroe added one final question. Is it possible that the animal wasn't just an animal? And that silence, heavy, drawn out, breathless, was the moment every person in that room understood. This story wasn't finished. It was just beginning. But who, or what, was truly behind it? The morning light wasn't kind. It was clinical, pale, sharp, the kind that exposes everything without apology. Outside the automatic glass doors of St. Alban Regional, the city moved on like nothing had happened. Sirens in the distance. Horns. A kid somewhere laughing. A breeze carrying a paper cup across the sidewalk like it had somewhere to be. Inside, by the reception area, a group of nurses huddled, whispering theories they knew wouldn't make it into the report. Some used the word miracle. Others just shook their heads. But Lucy said nothing. Her eyes followed the shape moving slowly down the hallway. The Genet, Jasper, they had come to call him, walked alone. No leash, no handler, no fear. Just the soft, methodical sound of his hooves tapping against the tiled floor, echoing louder than the heartbeats of those watching. One step, then another. Each footfall sounded like a farewell. The automatic doors didn't flinch. They opened for him like he belonged. And maybe, just maybe, he did. Lucy stepped forward, almost reflexively. She didn't know why she did it. There was nothing in any medical training manual that prepared her for this. She didn't call out, didn't try to stop him. That would have been wrong. Deep down, she knew. But as Jasper reached the threshold, she heard herself say, so softly that only the silence heard it, he only came for this. And suddenly, every fragmented moment of the last 48 hours locked into place, like a puzzle no one knew they were solving. The storm, the emergency, the collapse, the panic, the desperation, the near loss, the impossible survival, the baby, Michael, the cry, the awakening. And then, just as fast, he was leaving. No need to stay. Was it even real? One of the security guards moved toward the exit, not to stop him, just to confirm he'd actually seen it. He turned to Lucy. Where'd he come from? Her eyes didn't leave the doorway. I don't think that matters anymore. Another nurse added. Did anyone check for a tag? A chip? A ranch nearby? Lucy didn't respond, because something inside her had shifted. She knew this wasn't about identification. This wasn't about ownership. This was about purpose. And it was done now. Jasper stepped into the morning. The wind picked up. The automatic doors closed behind him. And just like that, he was no longer in their care. Or anyone's. No fanfare. No applause. No explanation. Only a question that none of them dared speak aloud. What kind of being walks into a hospital, saves 3 lives, and then simply walks away? But maybe that's the point. Maybe it wasn't about being understood. Maybe it was about timing, precision, intervention, just long enough to change everything, and then vanish before the world could name it. An orderly nearby chuckled nervously, trying to pierce the strange silence. You think he'll come back? Lucy didn't blink. No, she said, and he's not supposed to. Outside, Jasper walked past a bench, then the flagpole, then the corner. He didn't look back, because whatever had drawn him here had finished what it started. And if someone asked, why him? Well, they wouldn't believe the answer, but they'd never forget the question. The morning after didn't feel like a new day. It felt like something had been taken, not in a loud, traumatic way, not like a crash or a siren, but in the kind of way where someone opens a door and just never comes back. Inside St. Alban Regional, nothing looked different. The floors still gleamed. Coffee machines still dripped. Monitors still beeped in rhythm. But anyone paying close attention could feel it. Something was missing. A nurse named Brian stood by the window near the ER, arms crossed, staring out at the street. He wasn't looking for anything. He already knew whatever had come was gone. Behind him, the regular staff chatter resumed. Patient reports, medication doses, test results. But every voice was a little softer, like the building itself had lowered its volume. Did he really just leave? Someone from radiology asked in disbelief. Yeah, said Marta, one of the night nurses. No one stopped him. No one could. Lucy arrived late. She hadn't slept. Not a single hour. She wasn't even on shift anymore. But something about leaving it felt wrong, as if there was something left unsaid. She walked through the main corridor, where Jasper's hooves had echoed just hours before. The floor had been cleaned. Nothing remained. No prints. No droppings. No proof. Except for the way people were moving. Slower. Softer. With a kind of reverence that didn't make sense unless you'd seen him. In the break room, someone had written a question on the whiteboard usually reserved for supply requests. Who decides what a miracle looks like? No one erased it. Down in the records office, Dr. Reed scrolled through patient logs again and again, looking for inconsistencies, looking for anything that might explain why the baby who had flatlined started breathing the exact second Jasper entered the floor. He rubbed his eyes, clicked again, back to the vitals chart. He'd done the math 10 times. Still didn't add up. Could an animal, knowing a life was slipping away, could stop it? And if it could, what did that mean about everything else we thought we knew? At the security desk, James, the night guard who'd first seen the animal come through the doors, reviewed the footage for the 100th time. But this time, his hands were trembling. The cameras caught Jasper coming in. They did not catch him leaving. He checked again, from every angle, every hallway, every exterior door. Nothing. That's impossible, he whispered. But the evidence didn't care what he believed. In pediatrics, Carol held the baby again. He was sleeping peacefully now, his chest rising and falling like nothing had ever gone wrong. She pressed her cheek against his tiny forehead, and out of nowhere, she said, "I think he was sent, just not by us." No one in the room disagreed. No one even questioned it. Outside, a janitor swept leaves from the sidewalk near the entrance. He paused for a moment, looking at the spot where Jasper had last been seen. Then, with a strange weight in his chest, he mumbled, "Never seen eyes like that." Another janitor asked, "You mean sad?" He shook his head. "No, not sad. Knowing." Back inside, a doctor wrote a final note in a patient's file. Infant stabilized. Cause, unknown. Intervention, none documented. He stared at the cursor blinking on the screen, then slowly typed. But everyone present knows what they saw. And across the hospital, one unspoken thought lingered in every mind. Too absurd a voice out loud, too powerful to ignore. Was he ever just a donkey? Or had they been part of something far greater than any of them could explain? And if that's true, what happens the next time someone walks through those doors needing help? And he's not there. The sterile white walls of the hospital's birth registry office had seen countless names over the years. Names scribbled down in joy. Names chosen out of tradition. Names that carried the weight of legacy or the lightness of hope. But this one was different. Emily held the clipboard tightly. Her fingers trembled not from fatigue, but from the gravity of what she was about to do. Michael sat beside her in the wheelchair, a blanket over his knees, his breathing slow but steady. He hadn't said much since waking up. How could he? The doctors had told him he shouldn't even be alive. And yet, here he was, holding his son, watching the woman he nearly lost smile for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The nurse across from them smiled politely, tapping her pen against the corner of the form. "No rush," she said gently. "But once we fill this out, it becomes official." Emily looked down at the empty space beside the word first name. One box. That's all she had. One space to honor what no one could explain, but no one would ever forget. She inhaled, not just to calm herself, but to hold back the flood threatening to rise behind her eyes. "What if people don't understand?" she asked, voice quiet. Michael glanced at her. His eyes still carried that hollow grief from days ago, but underneath it now, something had changed. Not erased, just reshaped. "They don't have to," he said. "We do." And that was enough. Emily pressed the pen down and wrote slowly, deliberately, each letter etched with purpose. Jasper. The room fell silent. The nurse blinked, surprised. That's not a common name these days." Emily nodded. "No, it's not." The nurse paused. "Is there a meaning behind it?" Michael leaned forward slightly. His voice rasped from the coma, but clear. "Without him, none of us would be here. The nurse didn't ask further. Some stories were better felt than told. What makes a name worth remembering? Is it its history? Is it the way it sounds? Or is it because, somehow, when you hear it, your heart knows? Later that day, as the name was officially entered into the system, someone in the records department noticed something odd. The hospital's security system had flagged a file. A presence in the building that wasn't listed in any admission form, didn't match any patient chart, and somehow left no trace when they tried to track him leaving. Name field, blank. Species, animal. Time of arrival, precise. Time of exit, unknown. The IT technician furrowed his brow and clicked again. Suddenly, the screen flickered, and for just a second, the file refreshed itself with a name that hadn't been typed in by anyone. Just 5 letters. No explanation. No digital footprint. Jasper. Back in the nursery, baby Jasper began to cry. Not a loud cry, but a sharp, clear sound that seemed to slice through the hallway like a flare. Emily ran to him, picking him up, calming him. She looked into his eyes and froze. They were brown, but not just brown. Deep, calm, unshakable, like something had looked through him and left something behind. A nurse entered, chuckling. He's got a strong voice, that one. Emily smiled, but behind the smile, a question burned quietly. What if Jasper, the name, the animal, the miracle, was never just an animal at all? And what if this baby had inherited more than just a name? What if he carried a piece of something no science could explain? Something that might one day return, when someone else needed saving. But by then, would anyone still believe? The sun was barely peeking through the blinds of the maternity room, bathing everything in a soft, golden hue. The kind of light that photographers pray for and never quite expect in hospitals. But that morning, it arrived like a gift. Quiet, warm, timed perfectly. Carol, the hospital's volunteer photographer, adjusted her camera straps nervously. She'd done this 100 times. Family portraits for new parents, close-ups of wrinkled newborn hands, those fleeting first smiles. But today, something was different. Emily sat on the bed, her long dark hair tucked behind her ears, exhaustion and joy playing across her face like two melodies trying to find harmony. Michael, still pale, leaned in close, holding their son like he was holding on to life itself. The baby lay peacefully between them, swaddled tightly, unaware that his name had already begun to echo down hallways and across conversations in ways no one could yet understand. Carol raised her camera and paused. There was someone else in the room. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But no, there, standing near the open door, barely within frame, was him. Jasper, not making a sound, not moving, just watching. She blinked. Was it even allowed? A donkey in a hospital maternity wing? But no one seemed surprised anymore. No one questioned his presence. It had become, strangely, the least unusual part of everything that had unfolded. Can I take the shot now? Carol asked, her voice slightly shaking. Emily looked at Michael. He nodded. She smiled softly. Yes, please, capture it just like this. Click. The shutter snapped, and in that split second, time held its breath. What would the world see when they looked at that photo? A family, clearly tired but whole. A baby, safe and warm. Parents, grateful and changed. But in the corner, nearly shadowed, yet impossibly centered in emotion, Jasper stood like a sentinel. What kind of story does a picture tell when the most unbelievable part is real? Carol glanced at the preview on her camera. The image took her breath away. There, she whispered. That will live forever. But when she looked up again, Jasper was gone. She ran to the hallway, but there was no sound of hooves. No trail. Nothing. Did you see him leave? She asked a nurse who passed by. Who? The donkey. The nurse laughed lightly. Honey, if that's your biggest question today, you're doing just fine. But Carol didn't laugh, because she had the photo, and he was there. Later that week, the hospital board debated whether to allow the image to be shared publicly. Privacy concerns, legal concerns, spiritual concerns. But something strange happened. The image started circulating on its own. A nurse posted it privately to her friends. Someone screenshotted it. Then a doctor used it in a presentation about miracles. Then someone from the press got hold of it. Then the internet did what the internet does. The photo exploded, and people didn't just see Jasper. They felt him. Some called it a symbol. Others swore it was divine. A few skeptics tried to argue it was staged, edited, fake, but not one of them could explain what was in Jasper's eyes. Because in the stillness of that frame, there was something no one could quite name. A knowing, a peace, a purpose. Carol printed a copy for herself, not to frame or hang, just to keep in a drawer, folded between pages of a book she loved but hadn't finished. Sometimes she'd open it and stare, not at the baby or the proud parents, but at that quiet presence in the back of the room. Was he watching over them? Was it his goodbye? Or was there more to come? She could never shake that last question, because if Jasper appeared once, without warning, without logic, what would stop him from returning when the world needs him most? The photo had gone viral. It was on news sites, on blogs, Reddit threads titled Animals That Saved Lives, even in a church bulletin titled Signs We Still Don't Understand. But while the world was reacting with wonder and debate, one question refused to fade. Where did Jasper go? That's what brought local reporter Miles Carter to the edge of a back road 5 miles outside the hospital. A place not marked on any map, just a name passed by word of mouth, Granger's Hollow. He was chasing a lead, not one with official records or eyewitnesses. Just a voice message from a farmer who didn't leave his name. The voice had simply said, "That donkey in the photo. I've seen him before. Years ago. Thought I was going crazy. But he belonged to my grandfather. Why would a donkey vanish for years and then appear at that exact hospital, that exact moment? Was it coincidence? Or something more?" Miles stepped out of his Jeep and followed a winding gravel path through a gate so old the hinges moaned in protest. The farmhouse was crooked, weather-worn. A scarecrow leaned like it had given up the fight. And on the porch sat the man from the voicemail, rocking slowly in a chair as if he had all the time in the world. "Name's Ellis," the farmer said before Miles could speak. "Figured someone'd show up eventually." Miles lifted his phone. "You said you recognized the donkey in the photo." "I didn't say donkey," Ellis replied, eyes narrowing. "I said Jasper. That name again. How do you know it's the same one?" Ellis chuckled, then stood, moving with the stiffness of age but a surprising steadiness. "Boy, there aren't many animals like him. Gray coat, white star on his forehead, one ear just a bit offset or like it got twisted in a fence. Same gait, same stare. He looks at you like he's seeing something you haven't figured out yet." Miles hesitated. "But the photos from last week." Ellis didn't blink. "Last time I saw him, I was 15. That couldn't be possible. That would make him 43. Ellis smiled without amusement. "That's what makes it strange, doesn't it?" Suddenly, this wasn't a story about a heroic donkey. This was something deeper, weirder, maybe even frightening. "What happened back then?" Miles asked, his voice lower now. Ellis looked out toward the trees. "It was my grandfather's land. He always said Jasper wasn't an ordinary animal. Said he showed up the night my mother was born. Just walked out of the woods and stayed. Every time someone got hurt, he was there, but not like a pet, like a witness, like he knew." And then, Miles asked. Ellis took a deep breath. One morning, he was gone. No tracks, no sound, just vanished. Like he'd done what he came to do. The same pattern, the same disappearance. Always after someone's life was changed. But how? Was Jasper real? Was he some kind of trick of the mind? A symbol people projected meaning onto? Or was there something people were afraid to say out loud? Miles leaned in. "Do you think he's still out there?" Ellis didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, "I don't think he ever left. I think he waits." "Waits for what?" The old man's gaze was unshakable. "For whoever needs him next." Later, as Miles drove back down the winding road, he passed an old barn. Its roof collapsed, vines claiming its walls. For some reason, he stopped. He stepped out, the air heavy, quiet. Something about that place felt watched. He approached the barn slowly. A faded wooden sign above the door read, "J. Granger Feed and Supply." Granger. The same last name the hospital was built on. Could it be? Could the land be connected? Was the hospital built on what once was Jasper's home? And if so, had he been waiting there all along? Miles raised his phone and snapped a photo of the barn. Later, when he zoomed in, his breath caught in his chest. There, barely visible in the overgrowth, stood a figure. Not a man, not a shadow, but something gray. Still, watching, and right in the center of its forehead, a white mark, shaped like a star. But by the time Miles returned to the site with others, there was nothing there. No tracks, no animal, no explanation. Just one question. Who, or what, is Jasper really? The hallway smelled of antiseptic and something warm. Maybe freshly brewed coffee from the break room down the corridor. Emily leaned back in the wheelchair, cradling Jasper in her arms. Not the donkey, of course. Her son. Her miracle. Michael walked beside her, one hand on the wheelchair handle, the other holding a folded hospital discharge paper. The nurse at the end of the hallway gave them a soft smile, then looked behind them and froze. But nothing was there, because he was already gone. Jasper, the donkey, the impossible, the uninvited savior, had vanished hours earlier. No one saw him leave. No camera caught him walking out. No staff member signed him out. It was as if he had evaporated. But something lingered. A question, or 1,000 of them. Who or what was he really? Why had he appeared? And why then? Why her? Outside, the day was perfectly ordinary. The parking lot buzzed with life. A man dropped his keys. A teenager argued with his dad about the radio. A nurse lit a cigarette on the far end of the sidewalk. The world hadn't stopped. No fireworks had gone off. No bells had rung. But inside that wheelchair, holding a sleeping child in her arms, Emily felt a kind of thunder roll through her chest. What if we miss the most important moments because they arrive too quietly? What if we spend our whole lives looking for signs from above, when the answer is right here, beneath us, on 4 legs? The photo taken that morning sat on the edge of the hospital's memory board for 3 days before being removed. Too strange, some said. Too distracting. Too unbelievable. In it, Emily holds a baby. Michael leans in close. Both look exhausted, but there's light in their eyes. Behind them, barely visible through the window's reflection, is Jasper, standing still, watching, like he knew it was time to go. The staff tried to trace his origin. Animal control found nothing. Nearby farms claimed no missing donkeys. One older man, a retired rancher, recognized him from the photo. That donkey, he asked the reporter, looks like the one my grandfather used to talk about. Said he disappeared during a storm back in '78. But hey, that's impossible. He'd be dead by now, wouldn't he? A week later, in a small church just outside town, the priest used the story as part of his sermon. Sometimes, he said, grace doesn't knock. It walks, silently, into a hospital, into your life, into your soul. Some people in the pews nodded. Others rolled their eyes. But one woman in the back cried. She'd just lost her son in an accident. She told no one, but her heart clenched when she saw that donkey on the news. Why him? She asked herself. Why not mine? Emily's parents came to visit later that month. They'd been distant during her pregnancy, critical, uncertain, afraid of the responsibility she'd taken on alone. But now something had shifted. They didn't mention the photo. They didn't have to. Her mother just placed a hand over Emily's and said, "Some things don't make sense. Doesn't mean they aren't true." Then, almost as an afterthought, her father asked, "Do you still believe in miracles?" Emily didn't answer. She just looked out the window at the empty field beyond the hospital. Grass swayed in waves. Nothing unusual. Just nature. Just wind. But wasn't that where he stood before? Late one night, after Jasper had fallen asleep in his crib, Michael turned to Emily and asked, "Do you ever wonder if he'll come back?" She didn't hesitate. "No," she said, and yet her voice trembled, because she had looked, every morning, just for a second, out that same window. What was she hoping to see? A silhouette? A shadow? A hoof print in the mud? Months passed. Seasons changed. Jasper grew. The story faded from headlines. People forgot, or at least they stopped talking about it. But every once in a while, someone would hear hooves near the ER entrance, just a soft, rhythmic sound. Nothing confirmed. Then silence. A janitor once swore he found straw in the pediatric wing, but the security footage showed nothing. And maybe that's the point. Not every miracle arrives with warning. Not every savior wears wings. Sometimes they wear fur. Sometimes they arrive when we've given up. Sometimes they leave without goodbye. And sometimes they don't leave at all. Not really. They just wait. Somewhere. Watching. Listening. Ready. Because when it comes to what really matters, not the money, not the noise, not the headlines, but love and presence and selfless acts without explanation, we must ask ourselves, will we even notice if it walked through our door? And more importantly, would we be ready to believe? What if your second chance didn't come from a doctor, but from a creature no one could explain? Emily was about to lose everything. Her baby, her future, her breath, until Jasper stepped into that hospital hallway like he'd been sent by something greater than all of us. Maybe he was, or maybe he was a mirror of what we ignore every day. Silent kindness, selfless presence, the unbelievable power of the unexpected. Now ask yourself, have you ever judged something or someone too quickly, only to later realize it saved your life? What would you do if the impossible walked into your world, quietly, and changed everything? And most of all, what if the miracle you've been waiting for isn't waiting for you in heaven, but is already walking beside you, right now? Leave a comment below and tell us, what moment in Emily and Jasper's story shook you the most? What truth did it reveal about your own life? Your voice matters here. Your story might be the next one that changes everything. If this story moved you even a little, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to believe again. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next story might just be yours. We're not just telling stories. We're waking up the parts of us that forgot how to feel.